Hello, my name is Ryan Harp, and this is assignment 1 for FTT 111 Firearms Inspection and Troubleshooting. So for today's assignment, it's a two-part assignment. We have to ensure the safety of this weapon, and then we also have to run through a functions check. So the weapon that I'm going to be using today is my BCM Recce 14. It's a AR-15 model weapon made by Bravo Company Manufacturing. So before we even start touching the weapon, we're not intending to shoot anything today, so we want to make sure our workstation is clear of any live ammunition. We do have a magazine, a source of ammunition here. However, it is empty, clear of any ammunition, and we have 3 Magpul dummy rounds. So the only other thing that looks like ammunition here is my little piece of artwork of my .338 Lapua. So we've made sure that there's no ammunition, no live ammunition anywhere in the work area. So now we're good to start handling the weapon. So when we handle a weapon, the first thing we want to do is ensure the safety of the weapon and ensure we know the status of this weapon. So that means keeping our finger off the trigger, and then also we have to verify that the weapon is on safe, which it is. And we're going to go ahead and lock that bolt to the rear. So with the bolt locked to the rear, we can visually and physically inspect that chamber, ensuring that there is no ammunition anywhere in there. We're also going to stick something up the magazine well to ensure that there's nothing that's laying around, nothing that got left behind that can make its way into the chamber. So now that we've satisfied ourselves that the weapon is clear, there's no ammunition anywhere in the work area, we're going to go ahead and begin our functions check. So the first functions check we're going to do before we use any ammunition, albeit dummy ammunition, and any magazine, is going to be a dry functions check. So we're going to start that. We're going to allow the bolt to go straight forward. So when we let that bolt go straight forward, we can begin to feel the locking lugs engage. Once it pushes up, you can start to feel them rotate. So as the bolt carrier group forces that bolt into the chamber, there's a cam pin that is going to force the bolt to rotate on its axis and lock into the chamber, alternating with the locking lugs that are on the bore. So once we've gotten the first step, that cycle done, the next thing we're going to do is attempt to pull the trigger. So pulling the trigger, we get nothing. The weapon is unsafe. That is exactly what we intend. Next, we're going to rotate the safety selector switch from safe to semi, and we're going to pull the trigger again. Now, when we pull the trigger this time, the weapon should fire. So when we pull the trigger, the sear should release the hammer, allowing it to move forward and strike the firing pin. So you can feel and hear the audible click when the sear releases and the hammer strikes the firing pin. So on a live round fired, that would force gas down the barrel, which would come back through the gas port into the gas tube and back into the receiver, and cycle that action again. So now as that action cycles, the bolt carrier group comes to the rear, and at that point in time it's going to recock the hammer, locking it into the sear. Going to let that forward. Now we're going to check for the sear engagement after cycling by keeping pressure on the trigger the whole time we cycle the weapon. And then if the sear re-engaged, we should hear a loud metallic click like that when we release the trigger. So after that, we're going to rotate the safety selector switch back from safe to semi, and we've ensured this weapon is fired. So now the next thing that we'd have to worry about, if this was a burst or semi-automatic, or a burst or fully automatic, my apologies, would be checking that function. However, since it's just a semi-automatic, that is where the functions check ends on this. So now we do know that everything is moving correctly. So now we want to test and feel everything with a source of ammunition. In this case, it's going to be a detachable Magpul magazine, and we're going to use 3 Magpul dummy rounds. So we're using the dummy rounds to really allow us to feel what is happening in each step of the cycle of fire. So in the cycle of fire, first thing we're going to do, insert the magazine. So the first step here is going to be cocking this firearm. So since we have a dry gun, the firing pin is not depressed at this time and the hammer has not been released, but this is where we'd be starting. So we're going to cycle the bolt back. At that point in time, it's going to cock the hammer. So you can feel as you drag the bolt back across that hammer that it locks it into place and engages it with the sear. So the weapon is on safe. So now we're going to allow the bolt to move forward. It's going to pick up one of those dummy rounds dragging across the top of the magazine and force it up a feed ramp into the chamber, and that will chamber that round. So now when we get to here, and we're going to need to allow it to use some force or use the forward assist in this situation to get it to actually lock in. But once we're here and we're moved to the chambering part, we're going to move into locking the weapon. So as you can see, it didn't seat all the way. So now to assist with locking the weapon, we're going to go ahead and tap that forward assist until we get a good lock on the weapon. So it has locked, and with that dummy round in there, you can really feel it lock into place. So the next stage in this is going to be firing. Again, we want to ensure it doesn't fire on safe. Weapon is on safe. Pull the trigger, nothing happens. Rotate that safety selector switch from safe to semi. Pull the trigger to the rear. The sear releases the hammer. The hammer strikes the firing pin would then strike the primer, causing the bullet to travel down the barrel. The propellant behind it would force back down the gas tube and begin to cycle the action. So here is where you have to use some pressure. So now we're going to move on into the unlocking phase. So after the weapon has fired that round and the gas travels back into the receiver, the first thing that we're going to come to is it unlocking. So the gas forces the bolt carrier group to the rear, forcing that cam pin to rotate and adjust the bolt face to be back in line with the lugs on the chamber or the bore. And as that happens, the gas continues to propel the bolt back, and it simultaneously recocks the gun by forcing that hammer back down and locking it into the sear, and begins to extract, removing that round from the chamber, and then eject the round from the chamber. So we're going to allow it to go forward faster, picking up that round, feeding it into the chamber, cocking the weapon. So we're going to release the trigger, allow the sear to re-engage, ensure our bolt is all the way forward, which it is not again. Push the bolt all the way forward and allow the lugs to lock into place, allow the extractor to grab onto the rim of the round. So once that's done, we're going to fire the weapon again. Boom. That entire cycle repeats. The round is extracted, ejected, and recocked. And then now we're just going to let momentum carry the bolt all the way forward. And ensure that sear, grab the hammer. Now again, pull the trigger, quick cycle of function, just pull it out. The magazine source, or the ammunition source, the magazine is now dry. We're going to rotate that safety selector switch from safe to semi. Remove the magazine. The bolt is already locked to the rear. On the magazine, when the follower comes all the way up, it ends up acting as a bolt catch. So it locks that bolt to the rear, allowing the user to know that the weapon is dry and out of ammunition. So we're both going to physically and visually inspect that chamber again, make sure it's clear, put the weapon on safe, and we have completed our functions check.